After many months of trial and error and experimentation, I think I managed to find a very interesting way to create drinkable water from pretty much any water source in an off-grid setting. And this is why I'd like to share with you this RO water purifier from ITEHIL. So I've had the unit for about a month now. This is going to be a full in-depth review testing out this portable RO water filtration system. In this review, I did various different tests on it. I tested it on river water. I tested it with my rain catchment system, so rainwater. I also did a bacteria test on this water and compared it to my neighbor's tap water. I'm going to be sharing many of the pros and cons about RO water and what is reverse osmosis filtration, like what is it about. And in the various tests, I measured the PPM, so the particulates per million. I managed to test the pH level, and also I tested the RO water with a water distiller because the water distiller allows you to see what contaminants are in your water. And at the end, I'll just share a few tips and tricks and slight modifications and troubleshooting that you might find useful. I added a couple of things here and there. When it comes to the unboxing, personally, I was quite happy with the packaging. I think everything was very well organized. Inside the box, you get various different accessories which come with the portable RO filtration system. You obviously get two filters. You get the hybrid filter and the RO filter. I believe the hybrid filter is kind of like a pre-filter, so it tries to help minimize how much sediment is going to be going through the RO membrane because it's a much finer material. You get two pipes inside the box. One in my unit is white and one is blue. The white one is for your drinking water. The blue one is for the, let's call it wastewater. You can use this water for washing dishes and stuff like that. Personally, I don't. I just put it down back into the forest. And then the inlet pipe that comes with it, I believe it's like 3 meters or 4 meters in length. It's very long. It is a clear pipe. You might want to switch it to an opaque one if you want. Luckily, they're using plenty of standard piping that you can adapt and modify if you want to. And very useful how it has a little tiny filter on the end of that pipe. You also get a bag inside the box. I personally like the fact that it came with a bag. I was actually looking for another one like this. But you might want to use your own custom bag if you want to, but it does come with a bag, which I think is nice. So within the box, we also get a USB-C cable, which is nice to see. So you can plug it into your various different power stations. And you could, in theory, if you really wanted to, you could also run this unit directly from a solar panel, which is pretty cool. You might want to have a look at that on their website, actually. They do have a listing where you can get one of their solar panels and connect it directly up to this unit, which is pretty cool if you use the right set of cables. The instruction manual in it, I found it to be quite basic, I will say. Luckily, you can go to the website and then they have a manual that you can download as a PDF, and that has multiple different languages. So let's get into the setup and how to properly set up the filters. I will say that setting up the filters is quite critical to maintaining clean filtered water and to avoid any potential leaks. So what you do is that when you're inserting the filter into each of its compartments, they're very clearly labeled RO and hybrid. You lift the panel up from the unit, and then you take the cylinders and you line up the little arrows with the unlock symbol. Then before you do anything, you basically want to push it down and slowly slide it. And as you're doing that, you are going to feel that it will actually make some kind of vacuum airlock seal. And once it slides over to the lock symbol, it should be mildly pushed in and quite difficult to remove once it's locked. Make sure that there's nothing on the rubber gaskets that could try and catch on something. I will say this part's quite critical. Make sure that you insert them correctly. Luckily, it's fairly self-explanatory with the symbols and the unlock and the lock symbol and the open and close that are located on the filter itself. Now, without making this video overly too long explaining exactly what a reverse osmosis system is, I will just give you a very basic rundown. You basically have the water that's pumped into this unit. It goes through the pre-filter, and then that water, through the action of reverse osmosis, is then pumped back through the RO membrane. Now, the RO membrane filters down to a 0.0001 micron level. Bacteria and viruses are actually larger than this. Some reverse osmosis systems can even desalinate water, but you need very high pressures in order to do that. This one's just a very portable unit, so we'll just be using it on rivers, lake water, rainwater, that sort of thing. You might notice a few micro bubbles that could be sticking at the bottom and at the first initial phase, but that usually disappears within about a minute or two. They're normal to see and also harmless from what I've researched. You can filter very dirty water with it, but honestly, you're just going to clog up it filters in the pump. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would first run it through a pre-filter, maybe some kind of simple gravity system like the one I have on my rain catchment system. I have a large 500 liter tank that's connected to a Soya filter, and that one filters down to a 0.1 micron level. And then I use that water into this portable reverse osmosis water filter. I will get into some of the pros and cons of reverse osmosis. We'll start off with the good stuff about it, and then afterwards we'll talk about some of the nuances which you might want to consider with any reverse osmosis system. One of the nice things about this unit in particular is that it's very portable. Now, honestly, there are not that many portable RO reverse osmosis filtration systems that you can buy off the shelf. I still find that they're quite rare and at an affordable price. The nice thing with the reverse osmosis is that it basically can filter water to a very fine level, but generally speaking, it's one of the lowest power methods to creating very pure water. When you compare this to, say, the method of distilling water, I've tried that. I've made a review on it. You can have a look at it in the iCard. It does work. You can create very pure water, just like with the reverse osmosis system. The downside of the water distillation is that it uses a lot of power. So the unit needs to run at like 700 watts for like 3 to 4 hours just to produce like 3 to 4 liters of water roughly. And on top of that, once you've distilled all of the water that you want to collect, you'll be left with a bunch of sediment and waste that will be left in the bottom of the tank that you'll have to clean up. Comparing that to the RO filter, it's not even comparable. This portable RO system can fill up a liter of water in a matter of minutes, which is considerably faster. In comparison, it can produce about 500 milliliters of very clean, pure water within a minute. I would say it was more, maybe closer to 400 milliliters. It can depend on the height of where your water is coming from and how dirty your water is. But generally speaking, it's around like 400 to 500 mil within about a minute. And these portable, especially this USB-C powered portable RO water filtration system, it uses a very small amount of power. I plugged it into my portable power station, and when I was charging it, and it was also drawing power at the same time, the maximum power I saw was 20 watts. So it's definitely really economic to run. It's a fairly portable design. It is a little bit on the heavy side. I mean, you don't want to take this around for a backpacking trip, but when you compare it to standard household RO water filtration systems, they are much larger, and this unit is much more compact and actually portable with the built-in battery. Or you can just, take it from the car or take it out. It's very flexible in that way. Now let's move on to some of the nuances and things you might want to consider if you want to get into using a reverse osmosis system. When it comes to household RO systems, typically, for every liter of purified water, you lose about 3 to 5 liters. So that's a 3 to 1 or 5 to 1 ratio. Now, I have noticed with this portable unit from ITEHIL, it is a little bit better. It's probably closer to the 2 to 1, but that still does mean that you're using 2 liters of water to gain 1 liter. It depends on how dirty your water is. I think mine is probably closer to the 2 to 1 ratio, but it probably can hover very much around the 3 to 1 ratio as the standard. But that's still not bad. If you've got plenty of water and you're not concerned about that, and it rains plenty in your area, then that's not anything to consider worrying about. One of the main things I would like to touch up on is the fact that it does create demineralized water. Personally, I think it's incredibly important to remineralize this demineralized water that the RO strips out, basically, because it creates very pure water, which is amazing. But we do need to reintroduce minerals back into the water. That's just my personal take on it. I think it is very important. One thing that can help with that is I've been testing out very recently a budget-friendly remineralization cartridge that you can put after the RO system, because the RO system itself uses the standard 1/4-inch sized tubing, so you can actually hook it up with other components working in the RO world. I would like to see in the future ITEHIL probably offer a remineralization cartridge. If you want it to be really simple and you don't want to go for the cartridge route, something that you can do is just put a very, very small amount of salt, and it can be, the best one is Himalayan salt or either bicarbonate soda, which will raise the pH, and it'll also add very essential minerals into the water, but don't go overboard with it. Otherwise, you're going to make the water taste really salty. If you're going for a camping trip for 3 days or like a week, most people are going to get their minerals from foods. So you don't really need to worry about this for 3 days to a week of just drinking this purified water. It will get the job done, and it does filter to a finer level compared to using a soya filter. However, I would say on a long-term basis, you will need to research about how to remineralize the water. That's definitely an important aspect of reverse osmosis. Another thing that I would like to touch up on, which I would really like to see from pretty much any reverse osmosis company out there, is I would really like to see some recyclable filters. I'm not seeing a lot of that on the market right now, and I think we really do need to see that. And this is just something that you definitely want to consider. You want to use the filtration system on a regular basis to help clean out and move fresh water through the system. That will help with the longevity. But honestly, in the taste tests that I've been doing, where I basically take the unit down to my local river, I let it run through the system, drunk that water. I thought it tasted great personally. I also tried it on my rainwater. I've been trying it for quite a while. I've been drinking the water on a regular basis for about a month now. Definitely that first initial taste is actually pretty good. I'm actually quite amazed. It's a lot better than just using a soya filter, that's for sure. And it almost has quite a sweet taste in the first initial phase. I will say that this water is very sensitive. Once you put it into a jar or something else that might have like a musty smell to it or something, like if you put it into a cup that's not quite clean, you will get the taste of the cup. The unit does have a built-in battery within it, which I think is very handy. However, personally, I think it's a good idea to carry a spare power bank just in case. I think that's definitely recommended to try and make sure that the unit's always constantly topped up and mostly fully charged. That way the pumps will always have sufficient power to run properly. I think that is one thing that I'd like to mention. Now, when it came to the various different tests that I did, broadly speaking, I did a water distillation test. And the reason I did that was to see if the RO filter really does have no contaminants in it. So when you distill all of the RO water, you should see next to nothing left over in the water distillation. And that was the case. And to give you an idea, this is what the tank looked like when you just do water distillation on my rainwater. And then this is what it looks like with the RO water put into the water distillation. So you can see visually there's a pretty big difference. So it's nice to see that visually, but then obviously I want the numbers as well, more precision. So I got myself a TDS meter. And what the TDS meter does is it basically measures the particulates per million that are in the water. Now it's going to just measure everything broadly speaking. So it doesn't really give us a precise precision on like how much calcium and sodium there might be in it. Like this is just measuring PPM that was before and then also after. So interestingly, my raw rainwater was actually pretty low just to begin with. It was at 30 ppm, which I thought was really interesting. Then filtering it a little bit with the soya filter brought it down to 25 ppm. So it's already pretty clean water, which is pretty cool. I will mention right now that I do occasionally put some chlorine in the main tank, and that does pass through the soya filter into the 300-liter tank. I basically take the water that's been processed like that, and then I run it through the RO filter. So the RO filter was giving a reading of 1 ppm, so it really is actually a true RO. It does actually remove plenty of contaminants which would be in the water. Now, obviously that strips out minerals, and on top of that, I'm using rainwater, which basically has next to nothing in terms of minerals already. And also for a bit of comparison, my neighbor's tap water was reading at just under 200 ppm, which is actually pretty good, to be honest. We get a lot of calcium and lime scale buildup on faucets and stuff like that. And the cool thing with the rainwater is you basically don't get any of that, which is pretty cool. Now, when the RO water is then passed through the mineral cartridge, I was only getting 17 ppm. Now, I would like to improve that because I would say that's quite low for a mineral cartridge filter. But then what was interesting is that the mineral cartridge filter, I read through a little bit more in detail, and actually it's an alkaline filter. So what it does is actually going to boost the pH by a lot. The pH really shot up, so that was a really good thing to see that it does improve the pH by a huge margin. So when it comes to the RO, when you add grains of salt to it, plus obviously also passing by the mineral filter, I was getting a PPM rating of around 72. So moving on from that, the pH test was also quite interesting. I did it twice because the pH meter is really quite finicky to set up, and I wanted to try and give you the most accurate results I could, but the pH tester I've got is quite simple. you can read and see that the tap water is already quite good. It's around 8, which is really good. And then the raw rainwater is about a 6.8 or just around a 7, let's call it, which is quite normal. That means it's neutral. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just very neutral. And that's actually where we get the pH reading from. The neutral is 7. When it passed through the RO membrane, which was interesting, is it rested about the same, which was pretty cool. And then also the water distiller, I got a reading of 6.4. So it's definitely a little bit lower, creeping into the acidic range. I did that test again about a week later. The rainwater read about like 7, so that was about to be expected. The tap water was also around an 8, again to be expected. And then I noticed that the RO water did drop in pH, so it was reading a 6.4. So that's creeping into acidic, and this is when you might want to have a look at boosting the pH. Take these results with a grain of salt. Like I said, my pH meter is really finicky. For what it's worth, that's why I did the test twice. Now, the final test that I wanted to do was the bacteria test. And this is probably the most costly test I had to do. I ended up buying 2 test kits. The first one, I will say, I think that I got a false positive on my bacteria test kit, which is why I wanted to buy another one and redo the test. The instruction manuals in the test kit I used were not very clear, and I did a bit of research online. And these bacteria little DIY test kits are really sensitive. So if you put any contaminants from your hands or even from your faucet into the containers where you put the test water that you want to test, if you put that in the same container, it'll contaminate it. Another thing, which I really shouldn't have done, is I put the vials in full direct sunlight. During the test, you're not supposed to put them in direct sunlight. It messes up the test, long story short. So that was not mentioned in the first kit I bought. I got false positives, which basically if the water turns green, means it's bad. If it stays yellow, means it's good. So then what I did was I said to myself, I'm going to buy another kit. I'm going to be much more thorough. I disinfected my hands with 90% alcohol. I cleaned the area. I bought a new tube, which I'm going to use later, but I bought some new tube and I cut that and I disinfected that as well. I let the unit run for 10 whole minutes to do a full cleaning cycle. And then after that, I let the tap run for another 5 minutes before I took the sample from the RO filter. And then I did the same kind of thing with my neighbor's tap water. I let the tap water run for about 3 to 5 minutes before I collected the sample. This is so that you don't try to collect any of the contaminants that might be on the actual faucet itself. So the good news is that both of these tests, after waiting 48 hours, because you have to wait 48 hours minimum and keep the test kit at a minimum of around 20 degrees Celsius, they both came out negative. So that's really good to see. That means that the tap water is not contaminated with bad bacteria, and neither is the RO water either. And to be clear, the RO water is from the rainwater, not the tap water. If you want more accuracy with this test, you can leave the test running for an extra 24 hours. After 72 hours, this is the results we got as well. All in all, I'm quite happy with the test that I did. It does prove that it's actually doing its job. One of the main things I would recommend is just whenever you want to do a cleaning cycle, let it run for 10 minutes minimum, I would say. And that does actually help move water through the system. And you definitely want to avoid leaving stagnant water just sitting in the system for, a month or 2. And also, like I said, if you're just drinking this water for a week-long camping trip, this water will be perfectly adequate for your needs. So far, I'm quite happy with the unit. I will keep you posted in the comments down below how the unit functions over time. Definitely have a look at that in the comments. And also, I'm always looking to make improvements to the water system in general. Affiliate links will be placed down for your convenience if you want to have a look at the unit yourself. You can use the coupon codes down below to get a reduction if you're interested in purchasing one of these portable RO water filtration systems. For the next video, you might want to have a look at some of my off-grid videos. I've done various different videos about DIY solar, getting yourself off-grid, because this video is kind of like a part 2 to my first video, which was about the water distiller. So you might want to have a look at the water distiller video as well for some context. That's pretty much it for now. Like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in another video.